All right, so today we're diving deep, really deep into Islamic spirituality and mysticism.
Yeah, and the source material for this one, it's pretty amazing.
It is. It is. I think anyone who's interested in Islam or spirituality in general, they're going to get a lot out of this.
I thought so too. What we have is this incredible work by Al-Qushayri,
Yeah.
this 11th century scholar, and his book Lataif al-Isharat.
Subtle allusions.
Yeah, and it's not just like he's explaining the Quran, it's like he's kind of unlocking these hidden dimensions of the text.
Totally, totally. I felt when I was reading it, it was like I was seeing the Quran with new eyes. Like it's the same text that I've always read, but it's like he's pulling out these layers of meaning.
That's a great way to put it. It's like layers of meaning.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the things that really struck me was this idea of inner neighbors.
Oh, interesting.
And you know how like the Quran talks about treating your neighbor well?
Mm-hmm.
He takes that idea, he's talking about Surah 4.36, and he says, hey, our heart, our spirit, our inner self, those are our neighbors too.
Our inner neighbor.
Our inner neighbors, yeah.
I love that. And he even gives like specific terms for them.
Right.
He uses the nafs, the qual, the ru, and the sir, all these different aspects.
Yeah, to describe those different dimensions of our inner world.
Yeah, like an inner neighborhood. We need to be good neighbors.
You need to be good neighbors to ourselves.
Yeah. And I think that's so powerful because, we're so used to thinking about being good to the people around us.
Right.
But what about like our own inner world?
Right. Like what kind of thoughts are we letting in?
Exactly.
Like what kind of energy are we cultivating within ourselves?
It's almost like this inner hygiene.
Yeah.
Just as we wouldn't want to subject our external neighbors to like negativity or, abuse or harmful things.
Right.
He's saying we shouldn't do that to our own inner neighbors.
We shouldn't let vile thoughts harm our inner neighbors. And, that ties so beautifully, too, into the idea of God's constant presence.
Oh, that's a great connection. Yeah.
He reminds us, I think he's referencing Quran 57.4, that, for those who've reached spiritual realization, God's presence isn't just this, like, far-off concept.
Right, right.
It's a lived experience that shapes how they treat themselves,
Yeah.
how they treat others, how they move through the world.
It's woven into every aspect of their being.
Exactly, exactly. Okay, now let's talk about Surah Al-Fatiha,
Okay, the opening.
the opening of the Quran.
Yes.
I was so intrigued by how Al-Qushayri says that beginning your spiritual journey with this surah brings sublime happiness.
That's beautiful, yeah.
Isn't that a beautiful phrase?
It is, yeah.
Sublime happiness. And, you think about it, it kind of makes sense, right?
It does, yeah.
Because, I don't know a ton about Islam, but I know this surah.
It's the most fundamental prayer in Islam.
Yes.
So it's recited multiple times during daily prayers. Right, right.
So imagine starting your spiritual journey.
With a direct conversation with God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
That's what it is.
And that's what he's highlighting, like this direct connection.
Powerful, powerful stuff.
Yeah.
And speaking of connections, I loved how Al-Qushayri dives into God's attributes, specifically compassionate and merciful.
In Quran 1.4.
Yeah. He doesn't just like list them.
Yeah.
He really unpacks all the shades of meaning. It's like he's saying God's attributes aren't just these like abstract concepts.
Right.
They manifest in how God interacts with creation.
Yeah.
So, for example, he says God shows compassion through faith,
Mm-hmm.
through deeper knowledge, there's irfan in Arabic,
Yeah.
through forgiveness, even the bestowal of favors.
Right.
And then on the flip side, he shows mercy through guidance, knowledge, forgiveness, bestowing good pleasure, or ridwan,
Yeah. All those things.
even protecting us from harm. It's like God's actively engaged in our lives,
Mhm.
expressing these attributes in countless ways. Yeah, it's beautiful. And it's not just like a one-time thing.
Right.
It's this constant interaction.
It's this dance. It's this back and forth.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the contrasting paths that Al-Qushayri describes.
Yes.
Those who face God's wrath and those who prosper.
As mentioned in Quran 1.7 and 2.5.
This reminds me of like the different paths within Sufism,
Oh, yeah. That's a great
Islamic
Yeah.
mysticism.
Yeah.
So those who face wrath, they're kind of like, they're spiritually deprived.
Yeah.
They're stuck in this cycle of negativity.
Exactly. Yeah. Like they haven't found that connection to the divine.
While those who prosper, they're guided by insight. They're experiencing God's mercy and generosity in every aspect of their lives.
It's almost like choosing which garden to walk through.
Ooh.
One that's full of thorns and weeds, the other one flourishing with beauty and abundance.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Okay, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Makes me think about the next concept he explores, the sickness of the heart.
Ah,
And he
yes.
talks about this in his commentary on Quran 2.12
Mm.
and it's not a physical illness, is it?
No, no, not at all. This is about spiritual sickness.
Yeah.
It's about this hypocrisy, this associating partners with God, what he calls shirk.
Right.
And it's like this dissonance
Yeah.
between your actions and your inner
And
beliefs.
between what you say you believe and what you actually do.
Exactly, exactly. You say you believe one thing, but your actions are telling a different story.
Oh man, that's so relatable. Like when you know you should be eating healthy, but you keep reaching for the junk food.
Exactly. That's a perfect analogy.
It's like I know I should be doing this thing, but I keep doing this other thing that's not good for me.
Yeah, and he even compares the hypocrite to someone taking one step forward in faith and one step back towards worldly desires.
Yeah, it's a powerful image. And it's so relevant for us today, too.
Hmm.
We're constantly like trying to stay true to our values
Mm.
when faced with all these temptations.
Mm.
But Al-Qushayri is reminding us that this inner struggle, this is a timeless one,
Right.
and that true faith demands sincerity in both belief and action.
Exactly. It's not enough to just say, you believe. You have to live it.
Okay, now get ready for this one because this next passage, this totally blew my mind.
Okay.
Al-Qushayri compares lightning to moments of spiritual awakening.
That's beautiful.
Isn't that beautiful?
It is, yeah.
In his interpretation of Quran 2.12.
Mm-hmm.
And he's saying just as lightning, it illuminates the darkness.
Yeah.
Moments of spiritual clarity can bring us closer to repentance and God.
And those moments can be so powerful.
Oh, they can.
Like they reveal truths that we might have been blind to before.
It's like those aha moments.
Exactly.
But then he also cautions that they can be fleeting
Oh, yeah. Especially for those who are heedless.
for those who aren't paying attention.
They might have this surge of faith, like that flash of lightning,
Yeah.
but then they quickly revert to their old ways when the darkness returns.
Yeah, and it's not enough to just have those flashes of insight. You have to actually cultivate them.
You have to do something with
You
them.
have to do something with them, yeah. And he even includes this thought-provoking quote.
Oh, I love his quotes. What is it?
He says, anyone who is too shy to ride the terrors, owl, will be kept from realizing his hopes.
A wall. So he's saying that we have to be willing to
To lean into the discomfort.
lean into it. Yeah, like real transformation requires us to face those fears.
And embrace the unknown, even if it feels scary.
Exactly. We can't grow if we're always playing it safe.
Exactly. It's like, like being jolted awake, but then hitting the snooze button instead of actually getting out of bed.
That's such a good analogy, yeah.
It's like, oh, I see what I need to do, but
I'm gonna go back to sleep.
I'm going to go back to sleep. This whole discussion about this struggle between our lower desires and true faith, it reminds me of another powerful image that Al-Qushayri uses.
Oh, yeah, he loves those images. Which one is this?
This time it's in his interpretation of the story in Quran 2.73,
Oh, yeah.
where God commands the Israelites to strike a dead man with part of a slaughtered animal,
Right.
bringing him back to life.
Okay, yeah.
And Al-Qushayri uses this story to symbolize the process of reviving the dead heart,
Reviving the dead heart.
the heart that's become hardened by worldliness.
So he's saying to revive it, we have to sacrifice
We have to sacrifice
our lower self
that nafs.
through consistent spiritual struggle,
And he uses the term mujadat for this struggle.
which implies a conscious, ongoing effort
Right.
to purify ourselves, align with God's will.
Yeah, and that reminds me of the whole concept of jihad, which in its truest sense refers to this inner struggle against our base desires.
Yes.
It's about striving to live a life of virtue, a life of submission to God.
It's about that inner transformation.
Right. And while it can't have an outward manifestation, like standing up for justice, the inner dimension of that struggle is always primary.
It starts within.
Yeah.
Starts within, yeah. Okay, this next one also really made me think. It's the verse where God talks about providing for whomever he wills.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you wonder, if God's generosity isn't dependent on our actions, then where does it come from?
That's a deep question, yeah. And that gets to the heart of how Al-Qashari interprets Quran 3.27.
Mm-hmm.
He sees God's provision not as a reward for our action,
Right.
but as an expression of God's own will and divine unity, Tahid.
So it's not about like earning God's favor through our deeds.
Right.
It's more about recognizing that everything we have is a gift.
Precisely, yeah. It's like,
Regardless of whether we're good or bad.
regardless of our merit, it's a gift. Yeah.
It's a humbling perspective, though, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Because, we're so used to, in our culture, in our society, it's like, you have to work hard, you have to earn everything.
Right. It's all about merit.
But here, it's like, no, everything is a gift.
Yeah. And it fosters this sense of gratitude.
Yeah, yeah.
And reliance on God rather than pride in our accomplishments.
It's a radical shift in perspective.
It is, yeah.
Okay. And this idea of understanding God beyond our limited human perception, this leads us to Al-Qushayri's bold statement about Quran 3.62.
Okay.
He says the true story, the one that truly matters, is where the dust of confusion has no power over the witnessing of divine unity.
So he's talking about a state of knowing
Yeah.
that's so profound that it transcends all these limitations.
All the limitations of human perception, imagination, even language.
Yeah, like imagine a state of being where all that just falls away.
Yeah. It's almost like you can't even describe it.
It's indescribable.
Because it's beyond words, beyond concepts.
It's a direct experience.
It's pure experience.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about another passage where Al-Qushayri discusses this covenant God makes with all the prophets.
As described in Quran 3.81, yeah.
And he highlights the importance of all prophets, including Muhammad, believing in and supporting the final messenger.
Yeah, he emphasizes this significance of prophethood in Islam
Yeah.
and how each prophet is part of this chain
It's like a lineage.
leading to Muhammad, the final prophet.
Yeah, it's like this beautiful relay race where each runner carries the torch of God's message, passes it on to the next generation.
And it keeps getting passed down.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
And that lineage, it reinforces the universality of God's message
Right.
and the interconnectedness of all of humanity's spiritual journeys.
It's all tied together. It's all connected.
It is.
And that's just scratching the surface.
Yeah, we're just getting started.
We're just getting started with Al-Qushayri's subtle illusions. So much more to come.
I'm excited. Picking up where we left off last time, I'm just, fascinated by how Al-Qushayri starts his commentary on Surah Al-Nisa, right from that first verse.
Yeah.
He just dives right into the meaning of the word name or ism in Arabic.
I know. I thought that was so cool.
Yeah.
It's like he's setting the stage for us to really think about how even the simplest words
Right.
can hold so much depth, especially when we're talking about God.
Exactly. Yeah. And he explores these different interpretations of where that word name comes from. So some scholars link it to the word for elevation,
Okay.
emphasizing how high and exalted God is, while others connect it to branding, suggesting that God's name marks us as belonging to him.
So that's it's like this mark of ownership.
Yeah, and it really makes you realize that language itself
Right.
can be this doorway to deeper understanding,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to these spiritual concepts.
Yeah, it's not just about the literal meaning.
Right.
It's about these layers of meaning. And this leads perfectly into his discussion on fearing God.
Oh, yeah.
He's referencing Quran 4.1, where it talks about fearing God. And he really defines taqwa, the fear of God,
Right.
as encompassing all acts of obedience. But he doesn't just stop there. He kind of breaks taqwa down into two parts.
Yeah.
And I remember the first part being about abandoning shirk or associating partners with God,
Right.
which makes sense given the Islamic emphasis on God's oneness.
Exactly. Yeah, there's no God but God.
What was that second part again?
The second part is about being wary of everything other than God.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is what he says we should be most wary of.
With that?
Ourselves.
Ooh.
Our lower selves, our egos, our desires, all those things.
It's like that saying, our greatest enemies ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not about some external force.
Right.
It's about the battle within.
So taqwa isn't just about avoiding specific actions. It's about this constant awareness of God and guarding our hearts against anything that might distract us from him.
He connects this back to the idea of God's constant presence.
Oh, wow.
Saying that those who truly understand taqwa, they live their lives in this state of shyness before God.
It's like they're always conscious that he's watching.
Yeah, and witnessing their actions.
That brings a whole new dimension to the concept of fearing God.
It does.
It's not about trembling in terror.
Right.
It's about living with reverence and accountability, recognizing our place in this, like, grand scheme of things.
It's about striving to live in a way that pleases God, not out of fear of punishment, but out of love and gratitude
Out of love.
for his blessings.
Speaking of striving to please God,
Yeah.
I was really touched by Al-Qushayri's commentary on Quran 4.8,
Okay.
where he talks about, like, sharing inheritance, even with those in need who aren't, like, legal heirs.
It's such a beautiful example of how he takes this specific legal ruling and extracts a deeper spiritual principle.
It's like he's saying that even when we're dealing with, like, worldly matters, like inheritance,
Right.
we should be guided by compassion and generosity, remembering those who are less fortunate.
It's a good reminder that spirituality isn't just about personal piety.
Right.
It's about extending that compassion outward
Yes.
to create a more just and equitable society.
And that makes me think about his discussion on financial responsibility in his commentary on Quran 4.29.
Oh, yeah, where it warns against unjustly consuming another person's wealth.
And that powerful statement he makes, everything spent for something other than God is capital spent for nothing.
Ooh, that's a good one.
It's like, whoa.
It's a wake-up call.
That's a wake-up call. It's
Yeah.
like he's saying that, all our wealth, our possessions, it's ultimately fleeting.
Right.
The real investment is in our relationship with God and in actions that benefit others.
So it's not about rejecting material wealth altogether.
Right.
But it's about using it in a way
Yes.
that aligns with our spiritual values and contributes to something bigger than ourselves.
Speaking of aligning our values,
Yes.
Al-Qushayri then tackles niggardliness and hypocrisy
Okay.
in his commentary on Quran 4.37, where it talks about those who hoard wealth
Right.
and conceal God's bounty.
Yeah, and here he goes beyond just talking about material wealth. He expands the definition of shirk.
To include relying on anything other than God for fulfillment.
Exactly. It's about those attachments.
Yeah.
Looking at where we're placing our ultimate trust.
It's not just about avoiding idols. It's about guarding our hearts against anything that might pull us away from God.
And that can be so subtle.
They can.
It's not always these big, obvious things.
It makes me think about how sometimes we can, like, idolize things without even realizing it.
Oh, absolutely.
Like our careers, our possessions, even relationships.
Yeah, we can get so attached.
And Al-Qushayri reminds us that true contentment comes from recognizing God as the source of all blessings and aligning our lives with his will.
It's about that surrender.
Yeah.
That trust.
That trust.
And that reminds me of his beautiful interpretation of Quran 4.43.
Oh, tell me about this one.
Where believers are instructed to perform ablutions before prayer.
Oh, I love this one.
Yeah, he goes beyond just the practical aspect of washing.
Right.
And talks about the symbolism of cleansing different parts of the body.
It's so beautiful.
It's like each wash is symbolic.
Yeah, like cleansing our hands represents purifying our actions.
Exactly.
Washing our face symbolizes purifying our intentions, and so on.
It's like this preparation.
It's a beautiful reminder that prayer isn't just about reciting words.
Right.
It's about creating this state of inner and outer purity.
Yeah, that allows us to connect.
That allows us to connect
more deeply with the divine.
And he even explains, like, the different types of ablution.
He does.
Like, including dry ablution when water is scarce.
Right.
Emphasizing that, like, the outward form is less important than the inner intention of purification.
Yeah. The intention is key.
It's like he's saying that even when circumstances prevent us from performing those rituals in their ideal form, we can still find ways to connect with God.
Yeah.
Through sincere intention and devotion.
It's about that heart connection.
It's that heart connection.
Speaking of connecting with God, this makes me think about his discussion on Quran 4.44, where he tackles this sensitive topic, the distortion of scripture, by those who've been given a portion of the book.
And you can just feel his concern.
You can, yeah.
About the dangers of misinterpreting or manipulating religious texts.
It's like he's warning us to be discerning.
To be careful.
To seek authentic sources.
Yes.
Especially when it comes to matters of faith.
Because these texts can be so easily twisted.
They can.
And he specifically calls out those who twist scripture out of context.
Right. It's not just going against God's will. It's actively harming those who are seeking genuine understanding.
It's like leading people astray.
Yeah, it's a serious offense.
It's a betrayal of trust.
It is.
It reminds us that, religious texts, They can be powerful tools.
They are powerful.
And it's up to us to approach them with humility, with sincerity.
And a genuine desire.
A genuine desire to understand the truth.
Yeah, not to manipulate it for our own purposes.
This discussion of seeking the truth reminds me of another passage where Al-Kashari talks about obedience.
Okay.
Specifically in his commentary on Quran 4.59, where it mentions obeying God, the messenger, and those in authority.
And he highlights this interconnectedness of those three levels of authority.
It's like a chain of command.
Yeah, he's saying that true obedience to God includes respecting that chain of command.
And he also stresses like referring any disputes back to God and the messenger.
Right, meaning we should always seek guidance from the Quran and the Prophet's teachings.
When we're faced with these like tough decisions.
Yeah, like we're not just left to figure it out on our own.
Right, we have this guidance.
We have a framework.
It reminds us that Islam provides guidance for all aspects of our life.
It does.
Social, political, personal. It's a way of life.
It's not just a set of beliefs.
It's a holistic system.
It is, yeah. It encompasses everything.
This emphasis on order and hierarchy is really interesting.
It is.
It seems to reflect like the importance of balance and harmony
in Islamic thought.
Yeah,
it's about recognizing that true freedom doesn't come from chaos, but from submitting to a higher authority and living in accordance with those divine principles.
And speaking of submitting to a higher authority, this makes me think about Al-Qushayri's insights on forgiveness.
Okay.
In his commentary on Quran 4.64.
Where it talks about God's willingness to forgive those who sincerely repent.
He really talks about like taking personal responsibility.
He does.
Acknowledging our wrongdoing, seeking forgiveness directly from God.
And he also points out like the role of the messenger, Prophet Muhammad,
in interceding for those who have sinned.
It highlights that mercy and compassion that flow through him.
It's a beautiful reminder that God's forgiveness isn't about being perfect.
Right.
It's available to anyone. Who turns to him with sincerity.
And humility.
It's like that saying, God's love is like the ocean. It's there for everyone, no matter how far they've strayed.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
This emphasis on God's mercy makes me think about his commentary on Quran 4.79.
Okay.
Where he discusses this, I don't know how to pronounce it.
The Magian disposition.
The Magian disposition, yes. And he uses that term to describe like blaming external forces for both good and bad things.
Right.
Instead of taking responsibility for our own choices.
It's like constantly playing the victim role instead of owning our actions.
And he associates this mindset with like pre-Islamic beliefs, suggesting that it prevents us from seeing God as the ultimate source of all things.
So he's saying that true spiritual growth requires us to move beyond that victim mentality.
Yes.
And embrace our role
as co-creators.
As co-creators of our reality.
Recognizing both our free will and our accountability to God.
It's about stepping into our full potential as human beings.
Recognizing that we have the capacity to choose righteousness.
And contribute to a better world.
Speaking of choosing righteousness, I love his commentary on Quran 4.82.
Okay, where he talks about
the importance of pondering the Quran.
Oh, yes.
Like he's really challenging us to go beyond just reading the words and to truly engage with the text.
Right, to reflect on the meanings.
Yes.
To extract that wisdom.
He even suggests that if the Quran were from any source other than God, it would be full of contradictions.
It highlights that divine origin.
It does.
And perfection of the Quran.
And it encourages us to like approach it with reverence and a thirst for understanding.
Yeah, it's not just another book to be read and put away.
Right.
It's a living text.
It's alive.
That can guide our lives.
Yeah, if we engage with it wholeheartedly.
Wholeheartedly, yeah, with our full being.
That reminds me of his commentary on Quran 4.88.
Okay.
Where he talks about dealing with hypocrites. And specifically, he like cautions against trying to guide those whom God has led astray.
It's a tough message.
It is.
But it's about recognizing our limitations. Like we can't force anyone to accept faith or truth.
It's like that saying, you could lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Exactly.
Ultimately, God is the guide.
Yeah.
And we can't control the hearts and minds of others.
And that ties into this whole discussion of free will.
And divine decree.
Yeah, that weaves throughout Al-Qushayri's commentary.
Right, he acknowledges that, like tension between human choice and God's ultimate sovereignty.
It's a complex issue that he navigates with nuance.
He does, he does.
And speaking of nuanced issues,
Good.
his commentary on Quran 4.93
Okay.
provides a fascinating example of Islamic social responsibility.
Oh, tell me about this one.
He's talking about this concept of collective atonement
Yep.
for accidental killing.
Okay, so like if someone is accidentally killed.
Right. If a believer is unintentionally killed,
Mm-hmm.
the burden of blood money falls not just on the individual responsible,
Right.
but on the community as a whole.
Wow.
Specifically the elite,
Like,
those who are spiritually and intellectually advanced.
so it's like a shared responsibility.
It is.
A powerful illustration of collective responsibility.
It is.
It's like he's saying we're all interconnected,
Mm-hmm.
and the well-being of the community
Yeah.
depends on everyone doing their part.
And he even specifies that the people of deeper knowledge are responsible for the aspirants,
Yeah.
and the sheikhs are responsible for the poor.
It's like a hierarchy.
It is, yeah, like this spiritual hierarchy of support.
It's beautiful, though,
It is.
because it's like we're all looking out for each other.
we're all in this together.
We're all in this together.
Yeah.
And that's such a relevant concept, especially today.
Absolutely.
You know, when we're facing so many global challenges
Right, that require cooperation.
that require
That
cooperation.
shared responsibility.
It's a reminder that we can't just focus on our individual well-being.
Right.
We have a duty to care for others.
Especially the vulnerable.
It's like that saying, it takes a village.
It does.
And speaking of communities,
Yeah.
Al-Qushayri then turns to marital discord
Okay.
in his commentary on Quran 4.128.
Oh, where he talks about how reconciliation is better than separation.
And it makes sense. You know, like he acknowledges the challenges
Mm.
of maintaining harmony in relationships,
Yeah, it's not always easy.
but he emphasizes choosing reconciliation.
Whenever possible.
It's like he's saying it's a sign of spiritual maturity
It is.
to be able to like overlook those faults,
Yeah, to forgive
give and prioritize harmony.
over our own ego.
And he beautifully connects this to the idea of turning towards God,
He-
suggesting that when we cultivate that strong connection with the divine,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes easier
To forgive.
to forgive others,
To let go.
to let go of those grievances.
Yeah, it's like when our hearts are full of love
Yeah.
and connection to something bigger than ourselves,
Yes.
it overflows.
It overflows into our relationships.
It reminds me of how people say that you can't truly love others until you love yourself.
Right.
It's like that with God. The more connected we are to the divine,
Yeah.
the more we can love and forgive others.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
This reminds me of another passage, his commentary on Quran 4.133,
Okay.
where he discusses God's ability to remove and replace people.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a powerful one.
He's emphasizing that God doesn't need any of us.
Right.
We're completely dependent
On his grace.
on his grace and mercy.
Yeah, it's a humbling thought.
It is.
It's a good reminder to check our egos.
It is. You know, it's so easy to get caught up
Right.
in our own importance.
And forget that we're just these small parts. Tiny, tiny parts.
of this much larger plan.
It's a call to humility
It is.
and gratitude.
Recognizing that everything we have is a
Every.
gift from God.
This reminds me of Al-Qushayri's discussion on true belief in his commentary on Quran 4.135.
Oh, yeah, where it emphasizes seeking justice
Yes.
and standing up for what's right.
He explains that true belief isn't just about intellectual assent
Right.
or performing rituals.
It requires action.
It requires action.
Yeah, aligning our actions with our convictions,
Even when it's hard.
even when it's difficult.
He even suggests that those who remain silent in the face of injustice
Yeah.
are complicit in it.
Wow, that's powerful.
He's calling us to moral courage
He is.
and active engagement.
It's not a spectator sport.
It's not.
Faith demands that we take a stand.
Speaking of taking a stand,
Yes.
this reminds me of his commentary on Quran 4.141,
Okay.
where he critiques those who, like, claim to support believers,
Right.
but then abandon them when things get tough.
He calls out that behavior.
Yeah, as stemming from a lack of sincerity.
And true conviction. Yeah, it's about recognizing that genuine faith is unwavering.
Yes.
It doesn't depend on external circumstances.
It's like those fair weather friends
Exactly.
who are only there when the sun is shining.
Right. True loyalty is tested.
In times of adversity.
Yeah, in those difficult moments.
He even suggests that those who engage in this kind of hypocrisy might be secretly aligned with disbelievers,
Ooh, that's interesting.
highlighting the importance of choosing our companions wisely.
Yeah, who we surround ourselves with matters.
It does.
It shapes us.
This idea of consequences and accountability makes me think about Al-Qushayri's commentary on Quran 4.151,
Okay.
where he discusses the punishment awaiting those who associate partners with God.
Right. It's a sobering reminder
It is.
that actions have consequences.
He's emphasizing that while God is merciful, he's also just.
All right.
And those who persistently reject his guidance will be held accountable.
He uses this imagery of terror being cast into the hearts of disbelievers as they approach death.
So it's like the realization of their choices hits them when it's too late.
Yeah, like they can try to deceive themselves and others in this life.
But ultimately, we will face the truth.
The truth will be revealed.
Of our deeds before God.
Yeah, and that discussion of the afterlife reminds me of his earlier emphasis on God's mercy.
And forgiveness.
Yeah, it's like he's trying to strike that balance between hope
and fear.
Right. God's love is immense.
Yeah.
But it's not a free pass
to do whatever we want.
To live however we want.
It's about recognizing that our choices matter.
They do.
And that we should strive.
To live in a way.
You live in a way that brings us closer to God.
Closer to God, yeah. That aligns with his will.
And speaking of striving, this makes me think about his commentary on Quran 4.152.
Okay.
Where he talks about how God communicates with humanity.
Right, and he explains that God speaks to us through both clear proofs and subtle allusions.
So there's like different levels
of understanding.
It's like there's something for everyone.
There is.
Regardless of their like level of spiritual understanding.
And he even differentiates between how God spoke directly to earlier prophets and how he communicated with Prophet Muhammad through the angel Gabriel.
So God's tailoring his communication to the specific needs of the audience.
To the audience, yeah.
And within that communication, there are layers of meaning.
It's
about recognizing that the Quran isn't just this book to be read at face value.
Right.
It's a living, breathing text.
It is.
With endless layers of meaning.
And they can continue to reveal themselves. As we grow spiritually.
And speaking of spiritual growth, that leads us to Al-Qushayri's discussion of jihad.
Oh, okay.
In his commentary on Quran 4.157.
Yeah, where he refutes the claim that Jesus was killed on the cross.
Right.
But then he expands on the concept of jihad itself.
And he talks about how true jihad is about both the outward struggle against injustice
and the inner struggle
against our own lowered desires.
It's like fighting on two fronts.
It is.
The external battle for justice and the internal battle for self-mastery.
And he emphasizes that both dimensions are crucial for spiritual growth.
Like neglecting one can lead to imbalance and hinder our progress towards God.
This reminds me of something you said earlier about how like Islam is a way of life, not just a set of beliefs.
It's about bringing those two things into alignment.
The inner and outer world.
Exactly, yeah. It's about that integration.
And speaking of alignment, his commentary on Quran 4.160 is a powerful reminder that true strength comes only from God's help.
He's emphasizing that we're powerless to achieve anything of lasting value.
Without God's grace.
Without God's grace and guidance.
It's a call to surrender.
It is, yeah.
And trust.
Recognizing that our efforts
are ultimately meaningless.
Without God's blessing.
It's like trying to row a boat upstream without a paddle.
Oh, I love that analogy.
You might expend a lot of energy.
Yeah.
But you won't get very far.
You're not going to make much progress.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, and it reminds me of his discussion about what happens when we're forsaken by God.
Right.
Which he describes as being left to our own devices.
Yeah.
And driven by our lower impulses.
He paints that image of someone wandering aimlessly.
They do.
Constantly changing and shifting, unable to find peace.
Yeah, because they've lost that connection.
To the divine compass.
To the divine compass, yeah.
It's like being lost in a forest with no sense of direction.
And then he contrasts that with those whom God helps.
Describing them as being guided towards righteousness.
Right.
And blessed with inner peace.
It's like having a map. And compass.
That leads us through the forest.
Yeah.
Guiding us toward our destination.
Yeah, we're not alone in that journey.
This makes me think about his commentary on Quran 4.174.
Okay.
Where he talks about God sending down a light and a clear book to guide humanity.
And he explains that the light refers not just to the Quran, but also to that inner light of intuition.
And spiritual understanding.
Yeah, it's like this inner compass.
He emphasizes that both forms of light
are essential.
are essential for navigating the path to God.
And neglecting either one
Yeah.
can lead to confusion.
It's like having both a headlamp and a map
I love that.
when navigating a dark path.
Yes.
The headlamp illuminates the way ahead, while the map shows us the overall direction.
That's a great way to put it.
This reminds me of his practical advice for dealing with inheritance disputes
Oh, yeah.
in his commentary on Quran 4.176.
He really emphasizes fairness,
He does.
adhering to those Islamic legal principles.
It's like he's saying that even in these worldly matters, we should strive to act with justice
And integrity.
because God is always watching.
Always watching. Yeah, and he provides specific examples
He does.
of how to divide inheritance
It-
fairly.
It's a reminder that, Islam provides guidance for all aspects of life,
He does.
not just the spiritual stuff.
It's about living a holistic life.
Yes,
Where our faith informs our actions.
in every area.
Speaking of guidance, Al-Qushayri's commentary on Quran 4.178
Okay.
is another powerful reminder of God's power.
Okay, so we're back and we're ready to dive into those final verses of Surah Al-Nisa.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see how Al-Qushayri handles the topic of divorce,
Okay.
especially in his commentary on Quran 4.229.
Yeah, where it lays out the guidelines for separation.
It's amazing how he takes something that, could be very legalistic and dry
And dry.
and kind of brings it to life.
He does, yeah. He goes beyond just the rules and regulations.
Yeah.
And talks about the emotional and spiritual dimensions of it.
Yes.
Reminding us that even in separation,
Yeah.
we need to treat each other with kindness
With respect.
and respect.
Yeah, it makes me think about how easy it is to get caught up in, the legalities.
Right.
And forget about, the human element.
The human element, yeah, especially in these emotionally charged situations.
Absolutely, like divorce.
And he emphasizes reconciliation.
Whenever possible.
It's like he's saying, exhaust all efforts to repair the relationship.
Yeah, before resorting to separation.
Yeah, divorce should be the last resort,
The last resort, yeah.
not the first option.
And he really brings it back to, those core Islamic ethics.
Yes.
Justice.
Compassion.
Fairness.
Even in these, challenging situations.
Yeah, it's not just about following the rules.
Right.
It's about the spirit behind them.
It's a good reminder that, our faith shouldn't just be something we practice in isolation.
Right.
It should guide how we interact with others. Yeah, especially in those tough moments.
Especially in those tough moments.
This emphasis on ethical conduct makes me think about his commentary on Quran 4.230,
Okay.
where he talks about fulfilling our oaths.
Oh,
Yeah, and commitments.
Oaths. Yeah, those are serious business.
They
I
are.
remember him saying that breaking an oath can have serious consequences.
It can, both worldly and spiritual.
Yeah, it's not something to be taken lightly.
He talks about how it can damage our credibility,
Right.
erode trust in our relationships.
Our word should be our bond.
Exactly. If we can't be trusted to keep our word, how can we expect others to trust us with anything?
And it all ties back to, integrity and sincerity.
Right. Those qualities he keeps coming back to.
It's about aligning our inner and outer worlds.
Yeah, making sure our actions reflect our values.
It's like walking the talk. Walking the talk.
Not just talking the talk.
Exactly.
And he even offers, practical advice
He does.
for what to do if an oath has been broken. Right. He talks about expiation,
Making amends.
making amends, seeking guidance
Yeah.
from knowledgeable scholars.
It's like he's saying, okay, we all make mistakes,
Yeah.
but when we do, there's a process
For making things
for
right.
making things right. Yeah.
He emphasizes both personal accountability and adhering to those legal principles.
It's a reminder that Islam offers this comprehensive system
It does.
for navigating life's complexities.
It does.
Even when things get messy.
It's there to guide us.
Yeah, it is.
This makes me think about his commentary on Quran 4.252,
Okay.
where he talks about the unseen.
The unseen, or al-haibi in Arabic.
Yeah,
That concept always makes me think about the mysteries of life,
right.
the things that are beyond our understanding.
And he emphasizes that we can only know what God chooses to reveal to us. We
Yeah.
shouldn't try to pry into matters that
Yeah.
are beyond our grasp.
It's like he's saying, don't get lost in speculation
Yeah.
and conjecture. Just focus on what's been revealed.
Live by that.
Live by that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder to stay humble
It is.
and focus on what we can know
And control.
and control.
Yeah, rather than trying to figure out
Yeah.
the things that are ultimately beyond our understanding.
He even suggests that trying to delve into the unseen.
It can lead us astray,
Yeah.
create confusion.
Doubt.
Doubt.
So it's better to trust that God knows what he's doing
Yeah.
and focus on aligning ourselves with his will.
Rather than trying to unravel all the mysteries of the universe.
Yeah, right.
It reminds me of his earlier point about surrendering to God's plan.
Yes.
Accepting his decrees.
Even when we don't fully understand them.
Even when we don't get it.
Even when we don't get it.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that God's wisdom
is far greater than ours.
And that true peace comes from letting go of our need to control everything.
That's a tough one, but so important.
It is.
Yeah.
And it leads beautifully into Al-Qushayri's concluding commentary.
On Surah Al-Nisa.
On Surah Al-Nisa, yeah.
Where he emphasizes judging between people with justice.
Yes.
And fairness.
He reminds us that justice involves treating everyone equally.
Equally, yeah.
Regardless of their social status, their wealth, their connections.
It's about looking beyond those outward appearances.
And making decisions based on truth.
And fairness.
Yeah. He stresses that we shouldn't let our personal biases or prejudices influence our judgment.
Right. It's about upholding the truth, even when it's difficult or unpopular.
It's like being an impartial judge in a courtroom.
Exactly.
Weighing the evidence carefully.
Making a ruling based on what's right.
Yes.
Not who we like or dislike.
This emphasis on justice feels like such a fitting end to his commentary on Surah Al-Nisa.
It does. This whole chapter has been about
Yeah.
social responsibility.
Ethical conduct.
Ethical conduct.
The rights and obligations of believers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's saying, here's how to live a life
Yeah.
that's pleasing to God.
And beneficial to humanity.
And beneficial to all of humanity.
It's been incredible diving into subtle allusions with you.
It has.
Al-Qushayri's interpretations have been so insightful
Yeah.
and thought-provoking.
He's taken these complex concepts and made them so relatable.
So relevant.
And relevant to our lives.
If there's one key takeaway I'm walking away with, it's that true Islam is about so much more than just rituals
Right.
and outward appearances.
It's about cultivating that deep connection with God.
Yes.
That permeates every aspect of our lives.
And it's about striving to embody those divine attributes of compassion, justice, mercy.
In all that we do.
Al-Qushayri has given us a glimpse into the richness of Islamic spirituality.
Inspiring us to embark on our own journeys.
Our own journeys.
Of self-discovery and transformation.
And it's a journey that doesn't end with reading a book or listening to a podcast.
It's a lifelong pursuit.
It's a lifelong pursuit.
Of deepening our understanding.
Embodying these principles.
In our daily lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a perfect place to wrap up our deep dive.
I agree.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. And until next time, keep seeking, keep exploring, and keep diving deep